Okay, here's my out of focus background tutorial test thingy that I've played with before that we were texting about with last night. You know, how to make the background look out of focus to kind of emulate that depth of field background blurriness thing, you know, with a shallower depth of field. I'm going to use this photo that you sent. I called it panel wall because, hey, it's a wall of panels, um, which made this arch wall because, hey, look, there's a big arch on the wall. So I like to name things so I know what they are. See all my layers with Roger and Carol and Steven, and that way I know which layer is which. Anyway, we're going to use panel wall. I'm going to turn arch wall off. First thing I'm going to do is duplicate that layer. So we have two versions of it. And then make sure that the copy layer, you can rename it if you want. We'll just leave it as that. Make sure that's the active layer. I'm going to go over here to the gradient tools that we're going to use. Up here, this little box is your gradient tool options. I want to make sure that it's set from foreground to transparent, which by default should be that one, the second one in from the left. Say OK. Make sure foreground color is set to black. And then I like to use the quick mask mode for this because I like the quick mask mode for a lot of stuff, as you know. So which is this button right here. I'm going to hit that. And now with the gradient tool, the way that it works, I think you've probably done this before, wherever you start the gradient tool, anything above that is going to be completely 100% opacity. And then where you end it, anything below it is going to be nothing. So kind of like the midpoint of that line is going to be where the gradient transitions from 100% of the top to 0% at the bottom. So 50 is like right in the middle. I'm also holding the shift key down right now, so if I swing my mouse, you can just see the line stays perfectly perpendicular. If I let go of the shift key, you can draw at angles, but since in this case we want the line to be very, very straight up and down, so hold the shift key down, let go, you get that. My mask is green. I think by default it's red, so you can change the color if you want, but I like the green. So there you go. There's your mask. And then go back over to the quick mask mode. Again, this little button, click that to get out of it. And now you have a marching ants border over part of the image, right? So now, since we still have this copy, this duplicated layer, we're just simply going to go filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And this is where you may have to test with this a couple times to see, where the blur ends below and where it ends at the top, or if it's enough, if it's too much. Obviously that's too much, but we're going for that 5-6 feel, so it's just slightly out of focus back there. If I toggle it off and on, you can see what we got. With the gradient tool, when using the gradient tool to make that, obviously the transition starts up here at 100%, and then as you pull down it goes to 0%. So that's what the blur is doing. The blur is fading off also. So as I look at this, that may not be enough. So I'm going to back up a couple steps. We're going to cancel that. I'm going to deselect that. Go back to my history palette. We're going to undo those last few things. I'm going to undo the gradient. And the reason why is I'm going to pull the gradient down a little further this time. So gradient, quick mask mode. And I'm going to start about maybe the top of the painting right here. I'm going to pull down just a little bit further, assuming that the middle of the group is going to be about where the stools are. There, that brings it down further. So same thing now, quick mask mode to get out. Still on the copy layer, making sure that's the one we're going to blur. Filter, blur, Gaussian blur. That looks a little better now. So really, really difficult to see, but we have some transition from in focus to out of focus over on the sides now. So just simply say OK to that. Another reason for doing the two layers, so if that was too much blur, go to your opacity layer. You can decrease the opacity, which is going to let the layer below it shine through, which has no blur on it at all. So that's just another way to tweak and fine tune it. I'm going to leave it at 100% for now, because the other part of this is, obviously the floor right here is in focus in the scene. Well, really that part of the ceiling should be in focus also, because it's kind of somewhat on the same plane. So we're going to do the same thing, only backwards this time. So I'm going to deselect the marching ants border. I'm going to go back to quick mask mode. Now this time I'm going to start, maybe right here at the top of the wall, and I'm going to drag the gradient tool holding the shift key. I'm going to drag it up, and I'm going to stop at about the top of the light. So anything above the light is going to be completely, not affected by this. Still on that copied layer. So what we've done is now we've masked out what we've already blurred, right? So get out of the quick mask mode again. You have another set of marching ants border, but in this case we want to delete the blur that we've already done, right? We want to get rid of it because we want the blur on the ceiling to be gone. But the way we just did the mask, it's backwards. So you have to invert it, inverse it, so that the top little square is what is selected. Again, hit your delete key and it's going to remove that gradient blur from the ceiling. So now you kind of get the effect that, the ceiling here is nice and in focus, which again, the plane of the scene, the carpet would be the same thing too. So somewhat realistic, I guess. Turn it off and turn it on. You're kind of creating that illusion of something that's out of focus, and then by doing the gradient, it simply easily transitions top and bottom both. Now, if it's too much blur, like I said, you can just go right here with that layer active, decrease the opacity. It's going to let the non-blurred layer below it shine through. I think that looks pretty good. Shine through may not be the right word, but you know what I mean. So now, take that layer. I'm going to hold my shift key. I'm going to click the other panel wall layer to get both of those things, or you can move them both one at a time. Put them behind our group. I'm going to leave it above my shadows. I have this called group contact shadow, which is their feet on the floor. So there you go. The group obviously is way too big, so I'm going to just simply go up to Nate. I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom here and just get the people in their shadows. Hold the shift key, click there to get all of those highlighted. Now I'm going to do edit, transform, scale. Hold my option key down and my shift key down while I drag this corner point, and that's going to keep everybody. All right, I lied. Escape. Which one is it? Transform. Okay, I have to do it in order to say it. Okay, edit, transform, scale. If you hold the shift key and the option key, oh, it is option. I just said the wrong one. That way, it'll keep it centered that way. So now you can kind of position your group and get what you think is the proper scale to the scene. That actually looks pretty realistic, I guess. Say okay. 217 megabyte file on my old Mac, so it's taken a while. So there you go. When we zoom in and look at everybody, somewhat realistic back there. That might still be too much of a blur, but that's okay. We can just go back over here to this one again and just decrease the opacity of that blur a little bit more and let the sharp layer behind it. See, there's the sharp layer. There's the blur layer. Kind of looks like depth of field drop off, so I think it's believable. There you go. We'll leave it at that.